Welcome, class. My name is Professor Jase Ramsey. I'm a professor at the Florida Gulf Coast University in Southwest Florida in the United States. And I focus on international business, specifically managing cross-cultural differences, um, and topics aligned with how to improve performance within firms in different countries. And usually I teach this class in person there in Germany, but this year we're going to do a recording, and I really appreciated the opportunity from the chair to present this material from Florida. So right now I'm in Fort Lauderdale. Right out that window is the A1A, and on the other side of the A1A is the Atlantic Ocean from my side. I do really love living in Fort Lauderdale. There are tons of different nationalities and cultures to interact with on a daily basis, and so it really gives me an opportunity to practice the type of material that we're going to cover today. With that said, I did not start in South Florida. I was born in Kansas on a farm, and I basically drove tractors and rode horses for 18 years. Fortunately, I had the chance to travel a lot, and I realized that there was more to the world than my little window, or let's even call it a bubble, in Kansas. And so I went and did my master's in international management at Thunderbird. And one thing that they were really trying to understand there was a global mindset, or in this case, cultural intelligence. And what I found was that at least half the student body was not from the United States, and they had an ability to interact with each other and understand cultural differences way better than I did. And so I really dug into it and tried to understand why is it that they can do this, and can it be learned, and why it might matter. And so I started looking at expatriates at first, and then I started looking at international business travelers, and then finally I've been looking at this global or anywhere worker, where you're just dealing with lots of different cultures regardless of where you're based. And so I really think that this topic has a lot of room for growth, and I hope that you enjoy looking at it with me. So here's our agenda for today. What is cultural intelligence and its benefits? And then we're going to look at the four components, specifically drive, knowledge, strategy, and action. And then within each one of those four components, we're going to look at how you can improve it personally so that you can use it in your day-to-day interactions with people from other cultures. So let's start with the definition. What is cultural intelligence? It's defined as a capability to function effectively across a variety of cultural contexts. So it could be ethnic, different generations based on ages, organizational cultures, and of course, national cultures. It's a capability that you can take with you anywhere. And so it's not just a German studying to do business with someone in Spain, or a German studying to do business with someone in Italy, or an American learning how to do business with Canadians. It's an overall capability that you can use regardless of what cross-cultural context you're trying to understand and manage. What happens if you have low cultural intelligence? There are some big negatives. But before you dig into that, it's important to recognize that no one behaves flawlessly in cross-cultural interactions. And the best you can do is just recognize those mistakes and learn from them. I know that I've made a number of cross-cultural errors in even teaching this class, based on the fact that people see me as an American first, and so I can't make the kind of jokes that I make here in the United States when I'm in Brazil, or when I'm in France, or if I'm in other parts of Europe. And so make sure that you pay attention to those mistakes, and don't get down on yourself when you make them. The next thing is that people with low CQ don't recognize that they have low CQ, and so they don't realize when culture's influencing their business or themselves, and so they just see that they keep failing and they don't know why. And then finally, a low cultural intelligence is often the primary reason that businesses continue to fail. when they go to different cultural areas. And many of the case studies that we teach in business school, where there's a failure, there's almost always a cultural component where the business decision makers just didn't recognize what was important to the culture that they're dealing with, whether that be their supplier, their customer, their partner in a joint venture. Any of those things are downsides of not having a high cultural intelligence. So before I really got into researching cultural intelligence in an executive education format, the businesses that I was working with in Brazil really wanted to see is, does cultural intelligence lead to some important outcome? And so the first study that I did on this was measuring whether or not it affected transformational leadership, job performance, job commitment, and job satisfaction. All four of those things were improved by one's cultural intelligence. So with that in mind, we were able to dig deeper and find out how to improve cultural intelligence. Here is a picture view of cultural intelligence and its four components. On the top half of the slash is the consulting lingo, so to speak. And then below the dash is the academic lingo. So today we're going to go over the consulting, and because it's more applied lingo, and so you'll hear me, instead of referring to, for instance, behavioral cultural intelligence, you'll hear me say the action side of it. So let's first just give you a quick definition of each of the four components. CQ, drive or motivation. It's your interest and confidence in functioning effectively in culturally diverse settings. So do you even want to communicate or learn about different cultures? The next component is CQ knowledge. Do you actually understand them? Do you know what their laws are, what their customs are, what their greetings are, what their language is, these types of things. The third is strategy or metacognition, and this is how you make sense of culturally diverse experiences. So let's say you recognize someone shakes hands differently or greets differently. Do you know why they do that? And not just, I know that they do. That's cultural and cognitive cultural intelligence. Understanding why they do it is the meta or the strategy part of it. And then finally, can you do something about it? So you might be motivated to understand different cultures. You might know certain aspects of different cultures. You might know why they do the things that they do, but that doesn't mean that you're actually going to adjust your behavior when you deal with those people from different cultures. So these are the four pieces that make up cultural intelligence, and now we're going to dig into each one. A couple little things on, just before we get into it, on some of the benefits of increasing your CQ. That's stuff that's different than what I've done. Is it increases your ability to adjust in cross-cultural situations, increases your job performance, personal well-being is a third one, and you're in general a happier person. And then finally, profitability. Lots of businesses don't want to spend money on CQ training unless you can tie it to the bottom line, or excuse me, a profit version of the bottom line. And so research has shown that this is the case as well. A little background on cultural intelligence research. It's based on overall intelligence research. Basically 25 years ago, researchers dug into this, and they knew that an overall IQ doesn't help you in all situations. It's great, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't help you in, for instance, cross-cultural contexts. That goes the same with emotional intelligence or social intelligence. Those two different types of intelligences help you in different situations differently than how an IQ does. So then the research question became, why is it that some people and organizations can go in and out of different cultures and effectively do business where other people or organizations can't? So that became the research question. So back to this little note on intelligence research. Let's just give you some background. So everyone knows the definition of IQ. It's your cognitive capability. An EQ is your ability to detect and regulate emotions of oneself and others. And then finally, CQ is all based on these same fundamentals, but specifically focuses on skills needed in the globalized world. And then a little factoid, so to speak, is I don't know if anybody recognizes the gentleman in the background of this picture. This is Yoo-Hong Kim from South Korea, and last year he set the record for an IQ at 276, which is mind-boggling. No pun intended. Anyway, so specifics of CQ. It's more than just knowledge. You have to interact with other people to effectively use it. So it's not just enough to know differences in cultures. You've got to practice. You've got to learn from others in order to increase it. Incorporates both individual and cultural factors, how you relate and work across cultures. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it's transferable. It's not cultural specific. So, this skill set is something that you can take with you when you go from country to country, or even when you're not going from country to country, even when you're just dealing with people from different countries. You might be based in Germany or Florida, but during the day you deal with people from 5 different countries. And lots of times people think, oh, I don't need cultural intelligence, but yes, you do. Just because you're not in India dealing with a supplier, it doesn't mean that you don't have to understand what motivates them, why they may or may not be in the office on Friday, these types of things. So you do need it regardless of whether or not you travel internationally often. So now we know why CQ and what are its benefits. Now let's dig into the 4 components and how to improve them. So we're going to start with drive. And I usually like to start with drive because if you're not motivated to learn about different cultures and why they are the way they are, then you're not going to be able to adjust eventually or adapt in another country. So we start with CQ drive. Let's start with the definition. It is the extent to which you're energized and persistent in your approach to culturally diverse situations. It includes your sense of self-confidence and your abilities to, as well as your sense of rewards, both tangible and intangible, so explicit rewards, implicit rewards that you'll gain from functioning effectively in situations characterized by cross-cultural diversity. A couple of things that it helps with, it also is your ability to personally be engaged and persevere when you're challenged, and it's often one of the most important of the 4 components when learning cultural intelligence. Second, individuals high in CQ drive are motivated to learn and adapt to new and diverse cultural settings. Both of these seem pretty obvious to probably a lot of the people in this room who are high in cultural intelligence or high in CQ drive, but something that you got to think about is that not everybody is, and so why wouldn't someone want to be high in CQ drive? And the answer to that is because it's hard. It takes time, it takes brain power, you're going to fail lots of times, and so lots of times people just don't even want to go down this path of trying to learn about different cultures. So we want to start with this component on how to improve it. 3 areas are intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, and lastly self-efficacy. The 2 first ones are pretty obvious, and we'll get into them a little bit more in a second. But the third one, lots of people don't know that term. This is your level of confidence in doing business in a cross-cultural situation. So do you think you can do it? And so we'll look at how to improve all 3 of these components. Let's start with intrinsic motivation. So first thing you want to do is face your biases. Ask yourself honestly, are there some cultures that I just don't usually get along with? And then the flip side of that is, are there some cultures that I really do get along with? And face those biases. We all have them. We don't go to every country around the world would be like, oh, I can't wait to learn everything about you without having some bias. Let me give you an example. So right now, the United States is we've had a rift with Venezuela for quite some time. And so I still haven't been to Venezuela, and I would really like to go, but I know that I'm going to have a culturally challenging time because of the bias I have against I won't call it the regime, but just the setup over there or the business environment. So it's important to face that before you even go. One way to get around that is connect with existing interests. And so back to the Venezuela situation, I know that I really love to travel and I love to explore new countries. And so if you know anything about Venezuela, it is a tourism magnet. It's amazing. It has all the mountains, all the waterfalls, all the beaches, so much to do in one country. And so if I think I'm going to go there to do business and I can be like, oh, I'm going to go explore, I'm going to go with people that are Venezuelan, then that's going to be something that motivates me to understand them better. And then finally, if that doesn't work, then try and scare yourself. What happens if you don't deal well with them? I'm not going to get the sale. The class isn't going to like me. Maybe I lose my job. For sure, I don't get to come back and teach in Venezuela again. All of these things sometimes are motivational. And I guess I should point out that my wife is German. She's from the Bad Kreuznach area. And my son, who's 4, his name is Jonas. And he picked this ghost for this slide because right next to our house is a lemming forest. And so he thought that was appropriate for here. Next is extrinsic motivation. So visualize success. What does that look like? So for instance, normally that's what I was looking for. This is him. This is Jonas. That's in our town near Bad Kreuznach. That's the Nahe River down below us. And so one of the things when I come to teach in Germany is I visualize what it's going to be like there. And I look at, hey, what are the benefits of coming? And this is one of the benefits for me is I get to go visit my family. I reward myself with 2 weeks with them exploring the Nahe region and all of Germany for that matter after I come and teach. And then finally at the end of that, my batteries are completely recharged. I'm ready to go back to work. I'm ready to come back to Germany the next year. But all these things increase my extrinsic motivation to understand the German culture better. And then finally, you want to, in order to increase your self-efficacy, you've got to have a sense of control. Plan a lot. That's usually the one I think of most is plan a lot in order to maintain control. And then finally, travel. You basically just need to practice. This is what I found personally increases my self-efficacy the most is traveling to many different countries and practicing interacting with the people there. I think of it somewhere between 90 and 100 countries at this point. And I make sure that I go to a different country every single year and not just for the passport stamp. I mean, I really go and try and understand the people that I'm visiting when I go abroad. So those are the 3 components of CQ Drive: intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, and self-efficacy, and how you can increase all 3 of those. So the next one is knowledge and how to improve it. So let's start with the definition. It asks the question, do you have the cultural understanding necessary to be more effective cross-culturally? It is the extent to which you understand the role of culture and how people think and behave and your level of familiarity with those cultures and how they're similar and different from your own. And if we had an extra hour on this, we would either dive into the Globe cultural values or Hofstede cultural values or maybe Trompener's cultural values and position ourselves to understand where the German cultural values are, and then we pick 3 or 4 other countries that we want to compare and contrast those cultural values, and that comes into this component, the CQ knowledge piece. So it's an emphasis here is not so much on mastering all the ins and outs of each specific culture. You can't. There are too many. The most important part of it is developing an understanding of culture, its influence on thinking and behavior, and the primary ways culture differ. As I said, if we were looking into this a little bit deeper, we'd be comparing cultures, and let's say we're looking at the 5 Hofstede dimensions, and between the United States and Germany. Well, it turns out that maybe 1 or 2 really differ from each other. The other 3 are very similar. So what I would suggest is that you look at these 2 that really differ, and then try and understand how those differences affect your future interactions doing businesses between those cultures. And I personally go through this exercise whenever I'm going to do business, substantial business. So if I'm just going to have a 30-minute phone call, I'm not going to pull up the Hofstede dimensions and try and understand the differences in culture. But if it's a real relationship, then I will do this and try and understand how they're different. Basically, when you have high CQ knowledge, you possess a repertoire of understanding about how cultures are alike and different. So 4 components that you need to know. So business, so do you understand their legal and economic systems? Interpersonal, social norms, their values. So the values would be Hofstede dimensions, for instance. Sociolinguistics, how well do you know their language, and then how they express themselves verbally and non-verbally. And then finally, how do they lead each other? So let's look at each 4 of those and how you can improve it. So first, the business knowledge. Study the culture up close. People watch. Observe people specifically. Listen, watch longer than you normally would. Try and understand what they're doing. Google smarter. Go to grocery stores. Right now we can use Copilot and all the AI tools. I've got it pulled up over here right beside me in case I have a cross-cultural question I want to ask about this presentation. It's always on. It's my default, or excuse me, it's my homepage now. Right now it's Gemini Pro, but I mean, it used to be Copilot. Sometimes when I'm working in PowerPoint, it's also Copilot. So use this to your advantage. When I first took a job in Brazil 15 years ago, I had this is the next thing. I don't know. It'll come in a second. Basically, I had a CQ coach that, 2 hours a day, I was learning how to understand the culture of Brazil. I don't think you need that anymore. I think just AI and Google can deliver that for you, at least the knowledge components, the value components. These are some of the sources that I use right now: Financial Times, the BBC, The Economist. You notice that I don't put politically motivated, especially US-based outlets here because they're biased. And so I try and stick with these when I'm looking at various business knowledge elements of a culture. The next thing is interpersonal. So one of my best friends, he swears by watching movies in another country. Right now you can pull up your VPN, and my wife watches Bluey and Peppa Pig and various other cartoons. This isn't business, but all in German, and it's just super easy right now and free. So it's really easy to immerse yourself in understanding the cultures in another country. We can watch live news from Germany or in Germany while we're in the United States, etc. Learn about the culture values. That's what I mentioned earlier on the Hofstede dimensions. But it's also important to understand your own cultural identity. So it's not just, do you know the Hofstede dimensions of the Spaniards? You've got to know your own culture values in order for you to compare them. So if you don't, and lots of times you'd be surprised that you're wrong. And so let's say the Americans are notoriously high on individualism, but maybe I'm not. And so I think, Americans are all like me and they're all in the middle of the road. Well, that's wrong. And that's not the case. And so the Spaniards that deal with Americans are going to expect us to be individualistic if they're high on CQ knowledge. So you need to understand what your culture's identity is. Sociolinguistics, study a new language. This is the only bullet I put on here. Study a new language is hard. Let's be truthful about that. I studied Spanish as a whole separate degree in undergrad. I lived in Mexico for a year. I lived in Spain for a year. Finally got to where I thought I really knew it. And then joined the Peace Corps and moved to Moldova, and I learned Romanian, which at least is a Romance language. That was super hard, even though I kind of understood the grammar and the basics. That made it easier for me for when I moved to Brazil and had to learn Portuguese. But also hard, took up a ton of my time. Every day I was having to practice that language. It was mentally exhausting. Especially like at parties where, especially the Latinos, they talk fast and loud. And so by the end of the day, by the end of a party or a weekend 6-hour party, I was wiped. And so I don't recommend, my point is I don't recommend learning a new language unless you're really going to deal with those people for a long time. My German is still terrible. And a lot of that is because you guys know English so well that it's probably not worth my time to learn German. That said, it's hard for me to communicate with some of my family members over in Germany. So every year I spend about a month learning German, but it's a hard sell for me. So that's one component of CQ knowledge. Last thing is leadership. Seek diverse perspectives. One of the most valuable ways to enhance your CQ knowledge is by intentionally seeking different viewpoints. So your goal isn't to minimize differences, but to find out what you have in common. How do certain people like to be led? Do they want a group consensus? Do they want a person with a high power distance that tells them what to do and protects them in so doing? So you'd be surprised that not everyone wants to be led just like you do. So that's an important element of knowledge. And then I had this piece up here from a while ago as a recruit a CQ coach, but I don't know that you need that anymore due to how good AI is. Watch this presentation once or twice more, and you'll have a good idea of the 4 components and what you need to do to improve them. Then it's up to you just to dig. Third thing is strategy, how you can improve it. It's the extent to which you know what's going on in a cross-cultural situation, your ability to use that awareness to manage those situations effectively. Ask these certain questions. Am I aware, and can I plan appropriately in light of the personal and cultural dynamics involved? What do I need to plan in order to be effective in this cross-cultural situation? If you can do that, you can demonstrate high CQ strategy when you draw on your cultural understanding, that's CQ knowledge we just covered, to develop a plan for a cross-cultural situation or an assignment. With high CQ strategy, you can better monitor, analyze, and adjust your behavior in different cultural settings. Once again, this is time-consuming, both physical time and also mental time, so it takes a lot of thought. 3 components of CQ strategy. Awareness. This is pretty popular, awareness, mindfulness, in the psychology literature right now. Are you aware of your cultural dynamics that are going on in the situation? The planning component, can you anticipate how things are going to happen and plan accordingly? And then do you monitor it? After you get done with the trip or while you're in the middle of the trip, do you come home at night and say, am I right? Am I wrong? What do I need to adjust? If I were to do this again, or I was to advise a colleague who's coming next week to deal with these people, what should I suggest? How do I increase these things? First, notice, don't respond. This is hard to do, especially for Germans and for Americans for that matter. If we notice something, we like to respond right away, and that's something that we want to slow down, pause, and think through on things. Think widely, and then of course the next thing is going to be, focus deeply. Look at the big picture. Once you think you understand the big picture, dig deeper. Try and understand what's going on behind the scene. And then something that I personally do a lot is I write in my personal journal every single day, actually. Oops, let me go back one. We can stay here. Um, so every single day I write in my personal journal on all these things I've been talking to you about. What did I notice? What would I do differently? Let's say on average in the United States, I write 1 page per day, single space in my journal. And it's never, today I went to the soccer match. It's, something interesting about what happened in my day, what I was thinking, what I was feeling. I tell you, when I'm abroad and I'm dealing with other cultures, I write 5 pages a day, 6 pages a day, because there's so much going on. And that helps me increase my awareness. Okay, CQ planning, or strategy, the planning component. Plan social interactions. Don't just show up at the happy hour after work without any expectations of what you think is going to happen. Understand how they interact with each other. Do they share a beer? Do they buy their own wine? Who pays? Where do you sit? Can you talk about politics? All of these things are things to be thought of before you actually get there. And then manage your expectations. It's not always going to go well. It's almost always going to take longer than you thought it would to have some kind of a breakthrough. And then finally, create checklists. I use Notebook over here with the Microsoft suites. I've got it pulled up over here. I use this. It's got basically this big long list of checks that I go through every single day to make sure that I hit all the stuff, both personal and work, that I'm trying to do. So at the end of the day, I feel like I've got a good sense of control of my situation. So that's one way to do that. And that OneNote follows me around on all my devices, my phone, my 4 laptops, 2 PCs, whatever. It's always up to date and it's always with me. Next is checking. So check the situations, reframe the situation. If it doesn't go well, try and see it through the other person's eyes. That's hard to do. Test for accuracy. Did you accurately predict what you thought was going to happen? If not, why? This is all part of the CQ strategy or metacognition piece. Then ultimately, you need to start asking better questions. One of my best friends famously says that he's not in the business of finding solutions, he's in the business of asking good questions. And that is harder often than finding the solution. So dig deep into trying to understand what's really going on behind the scenes on things, and that will improve your CQ strategy. Last component is action. So you're motivated, you've got drive, you understand the culture, you've got knowledge, you understand why they have certain values, which is the strategy or the metacognition. Then the final component is, can I do something about it? Can I change my behavior? Can I adjust? At the end of the day, this is what we're ultimately judged by. It asks the question, what behavior should I adapt to in the cross-cultural situations? You can't adjust everything, so you got to pick some. CQ action, the definition, is the extent to which you can act appropriately in a cross-cultural situation. It includes your flexibility, both verbal and nonverbal behaviors to adapt to those cultural norms. So this isn't mimicking. Some people like, you should try and act, kind of. But people quickly pick up when you're mimicking their culture, when you're a cultural chameleon. I don't recommend doing that. All 4 of the CQ capabilities are important, but at the end of the day, this is the one that matters. Like I said, if you've got all these other 3 components but can't do something about it, then what's the point? It's the number 1 predictor. This is from my research on satisfaction and commitment, and the number 2 predictor on performance and leadership. So arguably the most important one. You use the other 3 capabilities to increase your CQ action. So there are 3 pieces: nonverbal, verbal, and speech X. So nonverbal, can you adjust your nonverbal cues and behavior in the situations? Verbal, change what you actually say, and then alter your communication effectively to achieve a goal. So do you use jargon? Do you speak fast? These are types of speech X. Nonverbal. So develop a set of social skills This is really important in almost all cross-cultural situations. At the end of the workday, you can't just go back to your hotel or back to your apartment and just watch movies for the next month. You won't understand their cultures, and you won't adapt if you do that. And it's tempting to do that because it's hard and tiring to go out onto the scene, the social scene, especially if you don't speak the language. Sometimes you can be an actor, just try and blend in, or do what the others do. If in Brazil they like to share a big beer, and so they'll bring out a big beer in a little cooler type thing, and then we'll have 6 little glasses around us. Someone will pick it up and pour, everyone the same beer, and so you could be an individual and say, I want this other type of beer, but that's not fitting into the Brazil culture. What you should do is you just do what they do. If they want to drink, I don't know, Brahma or whatever, something light, and you like IPAs, too bad. Time to fit in. And finally, make taboos taboo. Don't make jokes that would be considered taboo in another culture. I did this once in Mexico. One of my best friends is Mexican, and I made a joke about being late. It was not received well. I thought it was funny. My Mexican friend thought it was funny. My boss's boss did not think it was funny, and it cost me 6 months on my career. So don't make those kind of jokes. Verbal. So learn basic vocabulary. Even I know the basic vocabulary in German. That's a good start, and it's a good signal to others that you really care about them. Try new sounds. Try accents. This is one of the big things. Within Brazil, there are lots of different accents. Within the United States, there are lots of different accents. Practice them. Give them a try. And then finally, slow down. I did not do this on this talk. I'm sure that many of you are going to be like, why were you so fast, Professor? It's because I've got 3 minutes left, but I encourage you to slow down when you talk. Right here on the monitor in front of me are these 2 little post-it notes. One says slow and one says listen by my camera. So I remember to speak slower and to listen when I'm on international meetings. Video meetings. Last thing, speech acts. So put yourself in a place of need. This is a great way to start a conversation when you don't know the language. I'm sorry, I don't speak German. Do you speak English or whatever your native language is? That helps people not just assume that you're an imperialist, coming to their country and expecting them to adjust to you. And then finally, join a multicultural team. All of my teams that I work with, let's say I have 10, all of them have people from different cultures. And I feel like I have more innovative ideas, better performance when I have these types of teams. And so you've got to force yourself to do it because it's not natural. They're harder to work with because you've got to learn all the cultures before you can ever get to producing things. But I ultimately think it's a great way to increase your speech arts. In conclusion, we've got the 4 components. Try and keep them in mind. And so when you're learning different things about cultural intelligence, be able to label them. So if it's you're learning values about something, you know that's CQ knowledge or CQ cognition. When you're trying to understand why a country is collectivistic, that's your metacognitive, that's your strategy. If you're trying to understand how to adjust or what things I need to adjust, that's my action and my behavior. And then where I started from the very beginning, am I motivated at all to learn these skills? And that's your CQ drive and your motivation. And then go back to those slides on how to improve them, and you should be fine. Muchas gracias. I just took this picture. This is a recent team meeting we had at my place here in Florida. The guy on the left is a professor in Mexico. The woman on the right is a professor in Brazil. And every year we meet at some place around the world to talk international business, cross-cultural management, research projects. As you can see from here, we can visualize success. We have a lot of intrinsic motivation. We have a great time. We might work for 3 days, but we'll definitely take 3 more days off to play. And it really makes working and managing cross-cultural teams a pleasure. And I hope that you have the same experience going forward, and hope to see you in Germany at some point. Cheers.